Shalom. First and foremost, I would like to give all praises to Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shai, Bahashem, Ha, Rekah, Kodash, Ma'amah. Double honors to the apostles, a great millstone, and the elders. Double honors to my apostle and the elder as well, Herawan, Ben Yasha'Allah of the Lions Den Camp. Salutations to the fellow Akim, Outwafim, and children that believe in truth and sincerity. This is a land back lesson, all right? Stemming from our elders lesson. He went into Operation Epic Fury with pretty much going into World War III, Armageddon, the judgment of Yahweh Ba'ashem Yahweh Shai, as well as the deliverance of Israel, ultimately. All right, as Israel is a people before it's a place, as we know. All right, and the lessons previously in the recent. All right, but it says here in this title from Jacobin, which is like an alternative outlet, because news here is censored as we are. But it says here, holy war in Iran. And it says, for roughly half a century, about 50 years, a certain strain of American evangelical theology has taught millions of believers to read conflicts like Trump's war with Iran not simply as geopolitics in action, but as prophecy unfolding in real time. I was one of them. All right, see, there's a lot of people who think like this. As you see this individual right here, pictured, and it says Christians united for Israel. I mean, for them. It's lucky. But right, like the Bible Belt believers, right? Esau, Edom, people who are aware of biblical prophecy. All right, but they always end up with this whole false doctrine of the rapture, which they're going to go into, which there is no rapture. All right, the rapture is going to be an hour, all right, which is going to be the rapture of missiles from Yahweh Ba'ashem Yahweh Shai, all right? And that's what this war, all right, last war, according to Revelations, the scripture says, roughly paraphrasing, as the first and second war has passed and the third war coming quickly, all right? As our elder went into various scriptures, right? But it says, after the Cold War ended and the satanic panic died down, doomsday prophets needed a new geopolitical antagonist. Increasingly, their attention turned toward Iran. You know, trying to claim it as like conspiracy theory. You know, his week, Secretary of State, this week's like Secretary of State Marco Rubio characterized the leadership of Iran. I think as radical Shiite clerics. All right, always trying to blame it towards like the Islamic state. They trying to mask it as, you know what I'm saying? When it's really about the nation of Israel, as the nation of Israel is a people before its place, including so-called Negroes, Latinos, Native Americans, so-called Seminole Indians, all right? And those are the speckled bird who may look like or think they're the other nations, but they bear the same spirit, according to the spirit of truth, all right, and in His word. And their bloodline ultimately go back, all right? Their father's bloodline go back. Their father's father go bloodline, go back to the nation of Israel, all right? Cambodians, like Filipinos, you know, conquered nations, right? Living up under the curses, bearing witness of the truth ultimately, right? But it says here, that's deeply ironic because a combat unit commander reportedly told officers at a briefing last Monday that the war with Persians was, in fact, part of Yahweh's plan, right? It's part of God's plan. President 47, Nero, the commander allegedly explained, had been anointed by Yahweh Shai to light the signal fire. Yahweh Shai to light the signal fire in Iran to cause Armageddon, to mark his return to earth, right? And that's what he's doing, all right? He's not going to meet thee as a man, roughly paraphrasing. It says, since the launch of Operation Epic Fury, right, like what the elder was going into, the Military Religious Freedom Foundation, all right, MRFF, has been inundated with dozens of similar complaints from service members across every branch of the military, including the Space Force, right, which they made 6th branch of the military back in 2018. Nero did. The reports describe an unrestricted euphoria among commanders who believe they are not just fighting a war, but fulfilling the book of Revelation itself, right? All right. You know, it ain't no rapture to where, as they go into, look, it say, what popular tweet circulating this week attempted to explain the end times furies with a photo of the Left Behind book series beloved by Babylon evangelicals. I don't think enough people realize how much the Republican, right, which foreign policy is actually shaped by this fictional book series it read. It's a funny line. It's also not quite right. The Left Behind novels, the evangelical through the blah, 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 blah. So this is the point I wanted to get to. Then intellectual architecture of this worldview actually dates back to the 19th century and the 1830s. Nah, this date back. Yeah, well, Anglo Irish preacher John Nelson and Darby developed a system of biblical interpretation known as dispensationalism. Darby proposed that human history unfolds in the Bible in 7 distinctive divine dispensations, or periods in which God deals with man differently, from Adam and Eve to Great Flood to the crucifixion and resurrection of Yahweh Shai, Hamashiach, and so on, which he's right about that. The 7th and final age, which 7 also represents completion, or the kingdom age, right? Because that's what the Lord is getting ready to establish, as this is an age, eons that's getting ready to end, which is Job 9:24, the earth being given into the hand of the wicked, all right, for a time, in a particular time, right, in the season of times, all right, you know, him being loose for that little season, which was ultimately dating back to like what the Byzantine Empire, but he was loose, all right, as well as us being in this revamped Roman infrastructure, right? Him being healed, the beast that was wounded, that was healed, you know, ultimately representing his system. It ultimately has to be destroyed before the Lord established his system, all right? Before we go into the kingdom age, this particular age has to, you know, this particular eons has to be done away with. So it says here at the top, it says it's believed to culminate in a culminatric period of global upheaval before the rapture, right? So they mentioned in this rapture thing, you know what I'm saying? They always try to revert it and you know, just twist the gospel, right? Which is false doctrine about a rapture, you know, of an antichrist coming on the scene as like just one particular man is going to be the antichrist, the anti-messiah, which anti just mean against or like contender, as we know, all right? But the world, these people are, they go for the okie doke, and instead of diving into the scriptures, or they just not blessed with the spirit of Yahweh Shem Yahushua to understand them, right? So they fall for the okie doke of this rapture bull. And it says here, when believers would be magically transported to heaven, right? Because the elder went into that properly. Is into Revelations 11, verse 12, when it says, let's get it right quick. Salaki. Tripping. But it's not about the Islamic State. All right, just going into the point. All right, this is the book of Genesis, chapter 22. In verse 1, because just getting straight to the point on how Isaac shall the seed be called. Isaac was the one who went up to the mount, not Ishmael. Like, how they try to push forth this Islamic State because it's the war on, that's what's in the way as far as them establishing the NWO. But that's like the bait and switch. All right, when you look at it spiritually on how the Lord is gonna set them up for judgment. All right, to establish His kingdom. All right, to establish His people. All right, so it's gonna be a rapture of missiles ultimately to establish Yahweh Shem Yahushua's kingdom. All right, and His people, starting with the elect. And it's Genesis 22 and verse 1. It says the offering of Isaac, right? Because Isaac shall the seed be called. And it says, and it came to pass after these things that Yahweh did tempt Abraham and said unto him, Abraham, and he said, behold, here I am. And he said, take now thy son, thine only son Isaac, whom thou lovest, and get thee into the land of Moriah. Offer him there for a burnt offering upon one of the mountains, which I will tell thee of. And Abraham rose up early in the morning, and saddled his ass, and took 2 of his young men with him, and Isaac his son, and clave the wood for the burnt offering, and rose up and went unto the place of which Yahweh had told him. Then on the 3rd day, Abraham lifted up his eyes and saw the place afar off. And Abraham said unto his young men, abide ye here with the ass, and I and the lad will go yonder and worship, and come again to you. And Abraham took the wood of the burnt offering, and it's a quick read, and laid it upon Isaac his son, right? Because Isaac was the offering, all right? And he took the fire in his hand and the knife, and they went both of them together. And Isaac spake unto Abraham his father, and said, my father. And he said, here am I, and my son. And he said, behold the fire and the wood, but where is the lamb for a burnt offering? And Abraham said, my son, God will provide himself a lamb for a burnt offering. So they went both of them together, and they came to a place which God, Yahweh, had told him of. And Abraham built an altar there, and laid the wood in order, and unbound Isaac his son, and laid him on the altar upon the wood. Abraham stretched forth his hand. All right, so ultimately the point going into this story, you can read Genesis 22, but we all know the story of how Isaac was ultimate. He was the sacrifice, all right, but the Lord didn't have to. He told Abraham he had a sacrifice for him. All right, we'll continue on. It says here in verse 11, and the angel of the Lord, Yahweh, called unto him out of heaven and said, Abraham, Abraham, and he said, here I am. Verse 12, and he said, lay not thine hand upon the lad, neither do thou anything unto him, for now I know that thou fearest Yahweh, seeing thou hast not withheld thy son, thy only son, from me. And Abraham lifted up his eyes and looked, and behold, behind him a ram caught in the thicket. by his horns. Abraham went and took the ram and offered him up for a burnt offering instead of his son. Right. See how the Lord can just, he finds a way for you. All right. So it's just a testimony of just Abraham's faith, as well as just going into how it all stems back to Abraham being the Lord's friend. Right. The promise to Abraham. All right. But the promise to Abraham was going to be fulfilled through his son Isaac, who begot Jacob, whose name was changed to Israel. All right. So through Isaac to Israel. All right. So it's ultimately for Israel's sake, not the Islamic State. All right. This is the book of Romans chapter 9 and verse. And it's Paul speaking. But it says, this is Romans 9 and 7, neither because they are the seed of Abraham are they all children, but in Isaac shall the seed be called, right? That's the point. This is verse 8, that is, they which are the children of the flesh, these are not the children of God, right? These are not the children of Yahweh, Ba'ashem Yahushai, but the children of the promise are counted for the seed, right? You know, so that's the point. This is Joel chapter 3 and verse 1. The nations will be judged. Even the Lord's own nation, he's going to sift the house of Israel first. Zechariah chapter 13 verse 8. 2 parts going to be left therein. So a majority of the Lord's people are not going to be saved from the second Egypt. All right. This is Joel 3 and verse 1, and it says, the nations will be judged, for behold, in those days and in that time when I shall bring again the captivity of Judah and Jerusalem, right? I will also gather all nations and will bring them down into the valley of Jehoshaphat, right? Yahweh Shaphat, the valley of Kidron, the place of judgment. That's what we're witnessing being fulfilled right now, pertaining to WW3. I'm going to plead with them there for my people and my heritage Israel. So that's what it's about. All right. It's for Israel's sake. And again, Israel is a people before it's a place. As in, you know, referencing the so-called Negroes, Latinos, Native Americans, and Seminole Indians in the speckled bird, all right, who may look like the other nations, or think they're the other nations, but bear the same spirit and their bloodline go back to the nation of Israel, all right? Whom they have scattered among the nations and parted my land, right? Because it was his will, all right? And as it was his will, as he was wroth with his people, all right? He turned his face unto his people, all right? Only election is going to receive it. And that's who he's going to save and show his glory, his power through, in the midst of the whole world, right? And go and establish his righteous kingdom by abolishing this present system, all right, and present kingdom of Esau, Edom, all right? It's Joel 3 and 3, and they have cast lots for my people and have given a boy for a harlot and sold a girl for wine that they may drink. We went into that too. This Jeremiah in the recent. We went into that too in the recent. This is Jeremiah chapter. That's because it's a lot been going on. This book been firing on all cylinders. This is Jeremiah chapter 30 and verse 1. Deliverance from captivity promised. Right, because what is spoken in the Shemaims and the heavens and the fourth dimension, it ultimately shall be done. And as it has been done before, it's going to be done again to the fulfillment of the kingdom. All right, to the everlasting, to the promise of Abraham, right? To righteousness, right? This can't be what the Lord is with. We all know that. We can see that. So the Lord is getting ready to rapture this place through the third nuclear war, all right, to establish his kingdom, his righteousness, all right, through his son Yahweh Shai and his elect, right? Deliverance from captivity promised, and this is Jeremiah 30 and verse 1. It says, the word that came to Jeremiah from the Lord Yahweh Ba'ashem Yahweh Shai, saying, thus speaketh the Lord God of Israel, saying, write thee all the words that I have spoken unto thee in the book. Right. This was moved by spiritual men, all right, moved by the spirit of Yahweh Ba'ashem Yahweh Shai. All right, and they were told and noted in the book, and this is Jeremiah 30 and 3, for lo, the days come, saith the Lord Yahweh Ba'ashem Yahweh Shai, that I will bring again the captivity of my people Israel and Judah, right? You know, the whole nation, all right, southern kingdom and northern kingdom. Saith the Lord Yahweh Ba'ashem Yahweh Shai, and I will cause them to return to the land that I gave to their fathers, right? And they shall possess it, right? So you fighting over, they both over there fighting over something that don't belong to them. I also show a testament to what the Lord is getting ready to do and establish, and how this is unfulfilled prophecy. All right, as they said in the article, it said this is a rapture. But we know a rapture is not how they speak. And it says here when believers would be magically transported to heaven again. The elder went into Revelations 11 and 12, come up hither, right? Then as the story goes, the Antichrist will rule the world for a period of time until Yahweh Shai returns and rules a new paradise on earth for 1,000 years. That already happened as far as the Byzantine Empire, as we had stated. All right, him being loose for that season, I believe, paraphrasing, all right? Well, we mentioned it earlier in this lesson. He said, this also mentioned that 1,000-year period is mentioned of the Byzantine Empire because we had them in subjection, right? They also was in subjection under King David. It says here, dispensationalism migrated to the United States in Salakia, the Babylon, and eventually flourished in Babylon evangelical culture, right? The Bible Belt, you know. But they got it wrong. They get it twisted because they don't have the spirit of Yahweh Shem Yahweh Shai. They're not the people. All right. You can know what's going on, but to a certain extent, all right, you know, the Lord deal with his peculiar treasure, his peculiar people, which is the nation of Israel, all right, which is the so-called Negroes, Latinos, Native Americans, Seminole Indians, all right, and that's through a speckled bird, according to Jeremiah 12 and verse 9, because that's whoever it may be, according to the spirit, not according to the color, even though the color is a distinction, you know, sometimes. It says, for most Christians, right, like this modern day Christian, they say this theology is not especially persuasive. Catholic, Orthodox, and many Protestant traditions interpret the book of Revelation symbolically rather than as a literal forecast of 21st century geopolitics or as a metaphor, right? So they try to like put it in layman terms and be, how you said, like cliche, as if it's not supposed to equate to modern day times when it is, right? It's prophecy. But it's being fulfilled, all right? This is the pride of Esau, right? To say, or as a metaphor for the politics of the time when the New Testament was written. Many biblical scholars, for instance, believe that the reference to the beast in the Bible refer to the Roman Emperor Nero. Now, it's not the particular person, but it refers to the beast-like system, which represent NATO and the EU, right? Which ultimately what led them into this situation by way of who Israel is part of in conflict with, right? It's a notorious for his state-sponsored persecution of the early church or whatever. All right, but it's just going into like that rapture, but it ain't no rapture. You know, we go into that, you know what I'm saying? And say, you know, ultimately it's going to be a rapture of missiles like we brought out in Joel chapter 3, you know, and his determination is the God of the nations, all right? For his people, Israel, for his people, that's possessive, all right? But his determination to gather the nation, that's what's being done, all right, through the conflict that's been going on. That's just the elders going into the wars and rumors of the wars, right? This is the spirit of Yahweh Bashim Yahweh Shai, all right, returning, all right, to you know, turn their economic structure, right, and agriculture welfare for that, you know, the sake of war, you know, spoken of in Joel, right? They plowshares and pruning hooks, right? So this is all the spirit of Yahweh Bashim Yahweh Shai, you know, for them to, you know, go after the tools for war, for the Lord to show his power. All right. Again, he's not gonna meet thee as a man. He gonna be in the spirit of those missiles. Right. And he delivering a chosen few of his people to show his power in the midst of that. All right. To establish him and his son kingdom. So I want to get the book of Isaiah chapter 14 and verse 1. It say, for the Lord will have mercy on Jacob and will yet choose Israel again. All right. And set them in their land. All right. And strangers shall be joined with them, right? All the those who in disbelief, even 2/3 of our people, right? The wicked of our people, right? And the heathen, right? Those of the Bible Belt who think they know what's going on and they are part of it, and it's gonna be a rapture, and they supposed to be saved because everybody could be saved, and the world in John 3:16. It mean the whole world is included, which is not true. It mean cosmos, meaning a particular arraignment, right? Of a like mind of people. And that's what the Lord has established here on earth. And they say what? And the strangers shall be joined with them, and they shall cleave to the house of Jacob. And the people shall take them and bring them to that place, and the house of Israel shall possess them in the land of the Lord for servants and handmaids, right? All right. So like you're not 2/3 of our people, but the heathen, all right? Because 2/3 of our people on this side, they gonna be a part of the destruction according to Zechariah 13 verse 8. And but they gonna be born in the kingdom through the loins of the elect, all right? The few, seldom few, right? The 12,000 from each tribe. Again, that's why it's mentioned in Revelations 21 of the 12 gates, you know, representing the kingdom, right? Going into the nations of Israel, not as in the nations, as in the heathen nations, as in everybody can be saved. Nah, it's only 12 gates referring to the 12 nations within the only nation that the Lord cares about, which is the nation of Israel. So it ain't about the Islamic State, all right? It's about the deliverance of his people, all right? Particularly the elect, all right? The 12,000 men from each tribe, and the 1/3 men, women, and children that it's written to be saved, right? So As far as the other people, it says, in the house of Israel shall possess them in the land of the Lord for servants and handmaids, right? The heathen. And they shall take them captives, who captives they were, and they shall rule over their oppressors, right? And it shall come to pass in the day that the Lord shall give thee rest from thy sorrow and from thy fear and from the hard bondage wherein thou was made to serve, right? You know, it's going to be fulfilled then. Verse 4, that thou shalt take up this proverb against the king of Babylon and say, how have the oppressors ceased, the golden city ceased, right? You know, is it Nero? Maybe. Looking like it, right? As far as the king of Babylon, the Pharaoh at this present in modern day Egypt. But it's really the point is at the kingdom. All right, the kingdom, the golden city, the city they're trying to make great again. All right, it's going to cease because Israel is a people before it's a place, as we know, you know, and they're getting ready to be established. All right. Because here in verse 5, it says, what? The Lord, Yahweh Ba'ashem Yahushua, have broken the staff of the wicked and the scepter of the rulers, right? His system ultimately has to be abolished for the Lord to establish his son's system, right? This is Isaiah chapter 2 and verse 4. 4 is the point. I start at verse 1, and it says, Isaiah 2 and verse 1, Yahweh's universal reign, right, through his son Yahweh Shai, Yahweh Ba'ashem Yahushua, meaning Yahweh in the name of Yahushua. And it says, the word of Isaiah, the son of Amos, saw concerning Judah in Jerusalem, right, the nation of Israel. That's what this whole book is about, right? Everything else is just like NPCs and like non-playable characters and, you know, pawns and, you know, you got protagonists and antagonists, all right? What could a clay say to the potter, right? He made a vessel of honor and a vessel to dishonor. Ultimately to show his wrath, and he did it fairly, all right, stemming from and establishing from the beginning, right? Going from the promises and keeping his vows, right? Showing his perfection, right? It's Isaiah 2 and 2. And it shall come to pass in the last days that the mountain of the Lord's house shall be established, right? Mountain representing governments. And the top of the mountains, right? Out of all the governments on earth, right? And shall be exalted above the hills, and all nations shall flow unto it, right? We went into that. We should possess them. Isaiah 14. The captives would go possess those, you know, who captives they were, roughly paraphrasing, right? It say verses 3, and many people shall go and say, come ye and let us go up to the mountain of the Lord, Yahweh Ba'ashem Yahushua, right? To the house of God of Jacob, right? Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, right? It's going to be cleared in. Ain't nobody going to be playing around of they believe for this and that. You go, no. To the house of the God of Jacob, right? And he will teach us of his ways, right? And he will walk in his path, and we will walk in his paths, right? For out of Zion shall go forth the law, right? You gonna know, like, it ain't never left. You know what I'm saying? You gonna be like, yeah, out of Zion before go for the law, duh. And the word of the Lord, Yahweh Ba'ashem Yahushua from Jerusalem, right? You know, and he shall judge among the nations and shall rebuke many people, and they shall beat their swords and the plowshares, right? This is the shakedown. He gonna make you use it. So this is here, verse 4, Isaiah 2 and 4. And here's the point. He say, and he shall judge among the nations, right? And shall rebuke many people, and they shall beat their swords in the plowshares, right? And their spears into pruning hooks. Nation shall not lift up sword against nation, neither shall they learn war anymore, right? There's not going to be any war, you know. That's why it's only three woes mentioned in the scriptures. As far as like the Lord establishing his kingdom in the book of Revelations, I say it was referencing as far as in the book of Revelations, as far as that article. So nation shall not lift up sword against nation, neither shall they learn war anymore. O house of Jacob, come ye and let us walk in the light of the Lord, right? You know, this is the time to prepare for that. Now, as we've been preparing, but there's a lot of people that ain't preparing and not gonna. And this Isaiah 54 verse, I'll get to the point in verse 16. Behold, I have created the smith that bloweth the coals in the fire, and that bringeth forth an instrument of his work. Right, it's the Lord determinations to be to ultimately him put in the heart of man. Right, Esau, Edom, Teman, one of the nations of Edom, to split the atom, make the atomic bomb, to come into this nuclear age. Right, so ultimately how you come in is how you going out, right? And that was your blessing, as we all know. So it's the Lord created the smith that blew off the coal, all right, to split the atom, to make the atomic bomb, right? He created the waster, the harbinger of unaliving, instrument of his work, and I have created the waster to destroy. No weapon that is formed against thee shall prosper, and every tongue that shall rise against thee in judgment thou shalt condemn. Right, like this whole rapture thing, trying to say what a rapture is when we trying to tell these people what it is and what it ain't. This is the heritage of the servants of the Lord, and their righteousness is of me, saith the Lord. Right, Yahweh Bashim Yahushai, and the Lord said, is it will be in 1 hour, right? That's why he's going to cause the elect to come up hither. Yaharatazah, we're part of that number, all right? That's why we pray Psalms 23rd, the Lord's Prayer. I believe that's in Matthew. Like we go get ready going into when it comes to Passover, right? Psalms 91. Because we know what times we in. We know what the Lord is coming as far as his judgment, you know. So we don't want to be condemned. We don't want to be found with gall, right? And we want to be saved ultimately. So it's a quick land back. So a rapture of missiles coming to bring down this present system, for the Lord to establish his son system, you know, and ultimately to fulfill his promise with Abraham, all right, through Isaac and Israel, all right, Jacob, Jacob, right? That's also how you show Israel as a people before it's a place. They don't ever mention really Jacob. You know what I'm saying? It's like that's the state of But Shalom, Abadad, DTA, Salaki.